Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris Blue Ribbon, and I'm here with my very special guest, Henry Kroll, Captain Henry Kroll. You with me, Henry?
Yes, I'm still here.
Right. Well, we were discussing Sirius B, and we headed for a break there real quick, so let's go ahead and finish with that.
As I was saying, Sirius A puts out 4 times the light of our sun. It's a 2 solar mass star. And Sirius B could put out anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times invisible ultraviolet light of our sun. It puts out light slightly above the range of human sight. So when you're looking at those stars, they tend to play tricks with your eye and flicker a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite orbits around there 8 to 12 AU and a tight orbit every 54 years. So there might be times that it would eclipse behind Sirius A, but I'm not sure about that. We'd have to check it out. And all these records are known were ancient Egypt, and also the Greeks knew about Sirius and Orion. So we're just now finding this out. I may be the only one on the planet that knows where the sun was born. I'm trying to convince people that we came out of Orion. It's the nearest birthplace to us, and we're leaving the area, which is basic logic.
Mm-hmm.
Also, after we left Orion, space is very cold, and the sun only burned about 2/3 as hot as it does today. So naturally, Earth would freeze up and go into that Huronian billion-year ice age, Huronian glaciation. So anyway, we got captured by Sirius. We went between Procyon and Sirius and got into kind of a mutual gravity alignment, and Sirius B came around and grabbed hold of us and put us in a nice orbit there. And the heat from those objects plus the sun thawed the ice caps back, and suddenly we had this weird explosion of life and all these different weird life forms. And there's no explanation for it by science, because some of them had multiple legs and everything, and you had spores, and you had all different forms of life suddenly appear in the Cambrian era. And I think it was just because we collect a lot of seeds and dust and spores in space during that billion-year ice age after we drifted out of Orion. See,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the stuff was imported during that long period of time. So when it did thaw out, it just went crazy because we had a high-pressure hyperbaric atmosphere, mostly carbon dioxide, and then we had incoming light 24 hours a day from multiple suns coming in from all directions. And the years after the Cambrian era, the temperature went from, after the Huronian glaciation, the temperature went from 200 below zero on Earth to around 63 degrees Fahrenheit above zero, and it stayed around 63 degrees for the next hundreds of millions of years.
Mm-hmm.
And according to my temperature graph, which I got out of a Time Life book, during the Carboniferous era, when most of your coal and your oil and your limestone was manufactured by photosynthesis plants on Earth and in the oceans, the average global temperature went up to 80 degrees, hovered around 80 degrees, which is very hot and steamy. Well, after that, of course, we had huge animals on Earth. It was a hyperbaric atmosphere, and during the dinosaur era, which was, hundreds of millions of years later, we had animals that weighed 60, 70 tons walking around, but we had a high-pressure, maybe 30% oxygen atmosphere in times, and much more carbon dioxide, probably around 20% during the Carboniferous, maybe 10 or so during the dinosaur era.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, your carbon dioxide is 0.033%. Some say 0.04, which is, a third of 1/100th of a percent of our atmosphere. It's a trace gas, and we need it to grow food on Earth. So human release of CO2 probably is a good thing. We just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We're not smart enough to figure this stuff out. That's why I wrote the book, Cosmological Ice Ages. I put all the data in there, and hopefully that some young guys can pull it out of there and run with it.
Right. Yeah, it's a great resource. There's no doubt about that.
Well, yeah, I put in how many BTUs are in a barrel of crude oil and how many billions of barrels of crude oil and we burn each day and all that sort of thing is in there, and all the contents of the atmospheres and the nearby stars and everything else. And I tried to lay it out so we have a real good history of where we came from and where we're going.
Right.
And,
I think that's awesome.
I think that we should be getting off the planet and colonizing other stars, or possibly even terraforming other moons of Jupiter, and possibly other planets around other star systems. We found quite a few, 500 or more planets around other nearby stars. And it should be our mandate to do that instead of just sitting down here killing one another off over these weird religions, because they're,
right.
It doesn't make any sense. Somebody alien guy coming from somewhere else wouldn't want to associate with us, wouldn't want to come down and talk to us.
Right. Yeah, it's very hostile. Well, it's interesting.
We're insane.
Yeah, exactly. Well, obviously, there's a black technology program too. There's a black space program of some kind. So I tend to believe there is a breakaway society and civilization that's actually long gone and actually has done a lot of terraforming. I think that what's left here. Oh, go ahead.
Possibly, yeah. It should be anyone's mandate with any brains would try to keep intelligent life going in the universe and not annihilate it. You see, it would be non-productive. It's just, retro. Well, anyway, we left Orion about 2.5 million years ago. The temperature dropped from 63 degrees Fahrenheit down to 32 degrees on Earth, and it stayed there 2.5 million years ago. That was way after the dinosaurs. There could possibly have been humans living on Earth at the time, and maybe even prior to that. They found a lot of evidence of such dating back millions of years, even fossilized bones and skulls and coal that may be 30 million years old. But anyway, it suddenly dropped down to 32 degrees and put us into an ice age cycle. And I looked around our sun for something that would knock us out of orbit. At every supernova around us that I could find, the Vela supernova, whatever, and none of them are close enough or to have affected our orbit around the Sirius system, except for one thing, and that's the Barnard's Loop explosion. And I noticed that the scientists noticed that there are 3 stars leaving Orion in a triangle formation, and they're traveling at quite a high velocity at 800 kilometers or at 200 kilometers per second. That's about the highest velocity of any star they've ever found, was around 900 kilometers a second. That was a star leaving a galaxy, a far-off galaxy. But these stars are leaving a central point at 200 kilometers a second, and it's 800 light years apart from that central point. So they ran this back, and each one of those stars is twice the size of our sun. So that was a pretty violent explosion that knocked them out of Orion. It actually left a debris cloud around Orion that you can see with the naked eye, and especially with a red filter. You just hold it up there and look at Orion. On a very clear night, you can see that ring, and it's called the Barnard's Loop.
Okay.
Barnard was an astronomer, and he discovered Barnard's star, which is a red dwarf ahead of us in the direction that we are traveling, sort of, to the northwest. However, he also was named after the Barnard's Loop. But anyway, they ran this scenario with a Cray computer, and they did simulations in Switzerland and also down in Mexico City. We gave them a Cray down there. And Al Preveda and his partners ran 23 simulations of this event where these 3 stars, Mua, Gura, and 53 RTs, and the other ones, I forget, is leaving Orion in its big triangle. And they determined that explosion went off 3 million years ago. Well, it would have taken a few hundred years for the shock wave to arrive over at Sirius, because we were around 700 light years away from Orion at the time that went off. But it was quite a violent explosion to do what it did. So anyway, we lost our tractor beam, and we started making elliptical orbits around Sirius. Now, the reason I say this, it shows up 2 different places. If you go on Antarctic ice core graphs of data, you can see these squiggles where carbon dioxide decreases and increases at regular intervals. It matches the ice age cycle. The last one was 105,000 years. And you go look back further in time, those squiggles have become closer together, so the actual orbit period around Orion was less. So now we go out, the first ice ages were only a few hundred years, and we made about 58 orbits in the last 2.5 million years around Sirius.
Mm-hmm.
And we come in within less than a tenth of a light year, and everything grows like crazy on Earth, and it sucks up all the carbon dioxide and lays it down as coal and oil and limestone. And then we go out to 9 light years now. The first ones, ice ages, are only a few hundred years, where we got small ice caps on the Earth, but now we go way out to 9 light years, and we're at apogee, and we lost most of the vitality in the atmosphere on the Earth, and we have very little carbon dioxide. So when you do get close to Sirius, it makes a very thin layer of coal. Now, I've noticed this because I talked about this on Mark Snyder's interview about coal. I've mined coal for many years when I lived in Halibut Cove from these strata across the bay there at McNeil Canyon and Bluff Point. Homer was the original name of Homer, Alaska was Coal Point. And they mined coal way back in the 1800s, and they would transport it out on the spit there and haul it away. And it's lignite. It's not a very good grade of coal. But anyway, it's good enough for steam engines to power equipment. Well, I used to mine this stuff, and I noticed trees and grass and leave imprints in the coal, fossilized trees, and I never really understood what I was looking at until much later. In fact, even after I wrote the book Cosmological Ice Ages, I was able to ascertain more what was going on just by looking at the strata of coal. The top layers are only about 2 feet thick, and you can see about 6 or 8 different layers of coal, and each layer in between is glacier rock and thin layers of volcanic ash. So obviously the glaciers covered this plant growth and mashed it down into coal. And each one of those layers represents an ice age. It's just like a book, Mother Nature's book. All you got to do is look at it and read it, and nobody understands it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting the language there. For some reason, their scientists don't even get it. I got a CD-ROM from the University of Alaska of 800 pages on there about coal, and I tried to figure out how they dated it, and they couldn't date it. It's too old to date it with carbon-14. So they were trying to date the schist and the micas that are laying on top of the coal, but they were brought in by the glaciers, and they were formed in the mountains millions of years ago. So they were saying there was like 3 million years between some of these layers of coal. Well, they're much thicker down below, and maybe about 2 feet thick, the last layer of coal. And we're not seeing any coal being made on Earth right now, or oil, or limestone. But these ancient layers show that this stuff was being made by tremendous amounts. I learned from a geologist when I was writing the book that lignite or soft coal or bituminous has about a 20-to-1 compression ratio. So in order to make 1 foot of coal, you have to have 20 feet of trees and grass. And it's mashed down into coal with a big layer of ice a mile high. A big sheet of ice covers everything, mashes it down into coal. And then the glacier moraine and the silt covers it all up, and then the ice recedes, and then another layer of vegetation starts to grow, and you make another layer of coal. Well, to make a 5-foot layer of coal that I was mining down there on the beach requires 100 feet. 20-to-1 times 5 is 100 feet of trees and grass and vegetation and swamp and, muskeg mashed down into coal. And stumps and everything, because the ice covered everything. And it happened fast, fairly fast, within a few years, where the ice just mashed the forest and everything down, all that topsoil, and turned it into coal. And it's mostly carbon, but, you can burn the stuff. It has some gas in it, too, natural gas that's formed in there. And underneath there's pockets of gas around that area, methane, natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Mother Nature's book if you can read it.
Right.
And it's just amazing. It just blew my mind away when I realized what I was looking at. Each one of those layers is an orbit period around something that imparts additional light and heat to Earth to make all the plants grow. The only thing out there is Sirius A and B and Procyon, and Procyon is 10.4 light years away, and Sirius is 8 light years away. And we're heading toward both of those stars at 7.5 kilometers per second. And what we did is we just calculated the orbit period, which isn't too hard. The galaxy gravity is behind Sirius because it's transmitted in a big Fibonacci spiral from star to star from the black hole in the center. And we're traveling 3 million miles an hour in a big circle, around the galaxy, but it takes 250 million years or more to make one revolution. But we're losing ground as the galaxy rotates, so we're leaving Orion at 19.5 kilometers per second. But we're heading towards Sirius A and B at 20 kilometers per second, 27 actually. And we're actually, what I say is 7 kilometers per second, 7.5 towards Sirius. So altogether, we're leaving at around 27 kilometers per second. Sirius and Procyon are leaving Orion because we're heading back toward them because of their gravity. We're still in orbit around Sirius. That's why.
Right.
It's getting confusing. Even
No,
for
actually,
me
it's really fascinating when you think about it, Henry. I don't hear many people talking about this, so it's
well,
quite
nobody
interesting.
does because nobody got it. Nobody knows this yet.
Right.
I may be the only one on the planet that's got this figured out.
Well, I like to hear what you have to say. This is why I like to have you roll with information and, just let you talk about what you want to say because you have some good points.
Well,
Excuse me,
to
as I lose my
figure the
voice here.
gravity over there, to figure gravity, you got to multiply the mass difference between our solar system and Sirius times 4 because they got the galaxy gravity tugging at all of those stars as it rotates. So a mass difference, our sun is there's one solar mass, and Sirius A and B is 3.5 solar masses, has a mass of 6.8 E30, and the mass of our sun is 2 E30. So, 3.5 solar masses times 4 is 14 times the gravity of our sun in that general direction. So you could send a spacecraft over towards Sirius about 8 or 9% of the distance, shut the engines off a conventional rocket, and the gravity would eventually take you over there in a few 100,000 years, 70, 60, 16,000 years, you'd wind up at Sirius. However, I think we'll be pretty close to it, heading that direction around 17,000 years, to where the additional light and heat from Sirius A and B will bring in more radiation to Earth, and you may see more plants growing. And the ice caps will leave Earth, and we will have another warm period. Right. So technically, we're still in the ice age. We're way out here at 8 light years away. The ice ages last over 110,000 years. And the next orbit around there, we may leave Sirius forever, and we'll be in a constant ice age forever. And there won't be any atmosphere, hardly any left on Earth to lay down as coal, oil, and limestone.
And who knows, mankind might go extinct by that time in the illusion of space and time. You never know.
Yeah, but we have a lot of time. We got quite a few thousand years before we get there. So we should make the best of it, at least become more lucid, more intelligent, and know what's going on, by that time. We ought to maybe stop killing each other and start promoting life in the universe.
Right.
But, anyway,
I agree. Yeah, it's a crazy world.
The book is try to make people aware where we're going, what's going on.
Right, exactly. Well, it's very backwards here on this illusion of a planet, if you ask me. Everything is upside down, inside out, and just crazy.
Well, we don't even know what made all of this carbon energy that we burn. Our scientists don't get it for some reason, but
mainstream science, right? Yeah.
I mean, to look outside our solar system takes a big mental leap,
Absolutely. It takes a leap.
My co-author is the one that put me onto this, Brad Guth. He realized that their sun couldn't make this stuff. The sun didn't make this coal or this oil. the limestone, it had to be a light source from somewhere else. So we started looking around us, and the only thing near us is Sirius A and B that puts out all that light, you know. So, and we're heading toward it. So we started looking at the orbit periods, and lo and behold, it matches the ice age cycle when you do the math.
Right. And what system do you use when you look at the orbits? Is this something that the astronomers use, or is this something you calculated yourself?
Well, I did it two ways. We used proportions, and then we used ellipse calculations.
Okay.
And both of them kind of line up. You know, you describe equal areas in equal time in an ellipse.
Hmm.
And you also have another gravitational factor over there. You got to put in Procyon. It's at 10.4 light years. It's 3 solar masses. It's a little further away. So we come up with a gravity of about 27 times that of our sun. Not 14, but more like, what was it now? 20, about 22 times the gravity of our sun in that general direction. So using that figure, we were able to come up with a velocity. And my latest velocity was that our average orbit around there is 50 kilometers per second. So we're going to speed up to pretty close, 200 kilometers per second as we whip around Sirius, and then we'll go back out to 10 light years. And nobody knows we're in orbit around anything when we're way out there. And, you know, we could have been visited by the Anunnaki, and they could have come from a planet that's invisible around the Sirius system because there's so much light there, we can't see anything there. And there's a binary star system. We don't know if there's anything perturbing those stars to make them wobble or anything, so we can't really tell. And it could be a water planet there where, and at 1/10 of a light year, they could have come over to our solar system and arrived here. Now, according to Zechariah Sitchin, translation of the ancient Sumerian scrolls, he says that they came here in spaceships filled with water in a voyage that lasted 8 years. Now, I can't imagine swimming around in a tank of water for 8 years. You'd be kind of grumpy when you got somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But so they treated mankind kind of rough when they got here, if you read scriptures and other ancient writings. But they did give us a lot of mathematics and healing and architecture and all the scientists when they arrived here. And they probably cloned modern man to mine gold. And according to some of the other books I read, they had another race of people that they had brought with them called the Igigi, which they used to mine gold. And they were mining in South Africa 250,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole area was covered with a giant tsunami of gravel and stuff. And they're digging out ruins now, and the archaeologists estimate there's a city down there where they were mining twice the size of London or Los Angeles at one time.
Right.
And they had to move from there after the flood. Apparently they came up to Samaria, to between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and they settled there. But anyway, and it's all logical that they would come here in spaceships filled with water, we think, because, you know, we were just talking at the beginning of this broadcast that space is around 255 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit temperatures, so that if a micrometeorite pierced your hull of your spaceship, the water would squirt out and freeze instantly and plug the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And water being very essential for life, of course, is one of the elements you have to bring with you for any kind of a long space flight. And I imagine they had ways of purifying it to consume it themselves. And from what we have read about the Olmeys and some of the other ETs that came here, they're semi-aquatic. They like to soak in water. The Olmeys came up out of the oceans and gave the Greeks most of their technology. So we're finding out a little bit more at a time, you know, as people dig into these ancient translated. They've never been translated, a lot of these ancient writings and scrolls and clay tablets.
Right.
There's thousands of them in the museums in London and in France and the Louvre. They haven't even, you know, looked at them yet.
Right, and sometimes the translation isn't correct, and that's one thing you have to really look at is how they're interpreting the data. So that could be a bit of a problem. But yeah, it's quite interesting when you think about all this information. No doubt.
Well, it's possible. I think they could have come here in that voyage of 8 years from Cirrus when we were at our closest point of less than a tenth of a light year, maybe a 50th of a light year. They could have come over here. Now, we've done quite a bit of thinking about how you would travel to other star systems, and I did put some of that stuff in the book, some of the data on that. You can't really get up to light speed unless you can somehow become interdimensional and not be able to pass through meteorites and other objects. We just don't have that technology yet, but we figure you could get up, maybe you might last at 100,000 miles an hour, 1/10 or less, maybe a tenth of light speed for a little while before something killed you. Now, if you wanted to send life to another planet, you could send 1-inch diameter rockets, maybe to another solar system outside our inner galaxy, maybe 500 light years distance or something like that. You could send these 1-inch pipes over there with spores and DNA in them, seeds and that sort of thing at high velocity. You could maybe a tenth of a light year take you, 5,000 years to get there. You could terraform a planet in one of those star systems, but it's a little impractical so far. We just don't have the way to get there, but they're working on it.
Well, it's very interesting information you have here tonight. That's for darn sure.
Well, we consider all these things and how you could go to other star systems, and we're limited by a velocity because we can't shield ourselves from the meteorites and the micrometeorites or the dust in space. You'd have to slow down for certain areas if you came near other stars. Now, I put in my book pictures of an object that was in the Palo Alto Koretz laboratory in California. They put those photographs of these things on the web. I think they're star charts, and they don't know what they are. They think they're a schematic for a time machine that they have. It's a funny-looking object that might be part of a flying saucer, some kind of spaceship that they found at the Koretz laboratory. And it's their job to translate it and figure it out. But I've noticed all of these round circles in the star charts have curved lines at various widths in curves, and they go around certain moons of these objects utilizing the gravity is what it looks like. So I think they're star charts. Because I read with great whites, the guys that live in the Mojave or the desert down there in Arizona, the Indian Springs area where the John Hall was stationed as a weather observer. They use our moon at a certain time of year to come from the direction where they came from to slow down. We use the gravity of our moon to whip around it and then come to Earth. But they can't come here only unless it's a certain time of the month when the moon's lined up.
Right. So where can these star charts be viewed?
They're in my book, Cosmological Ice Ages.
Okay.
You can see they come from the Koretz laboratory. And they're curved circles, and they don't make a whole lot of sense to me. I haven't really studied them that much, but I thought they were interesting, so I put them in the book.
Right. Oh, it sounds very interesting. Well, you know how to navigate with the night sky, and that's the difference. You know the stars from your background, so it does make a difference. A lot of people don't look up at the stars.
I learned some of it from my co-author because we talked about mutual gravity alignments and that sort of thing. It took me a week just thinking about that, what that is, you see. When you're between two massive stars, you could be sucked in by the gravity of either one unless you're in this soft, sweet spot in between there,
Right.
And you can, otherwise, you're going to burn a lot of fuel. If you're using conventional rocketry or something like that, you don't want to be near any kind of thing and just try to power away from it. You have to be very careful. You're going to burn up all your fuel trying to get away from this thing. So you want to hit those mutual gravity alignments if you're trying to go somewhere.
Right.
to another star system. You
We
don't
have a
want to get
question
too
here,
close to
Henry.
either one.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but we have a brief. I got a text from someone asking about. Could you talk about the relationship with Alcyon of the Pleiades and Sirius?
Well, the Pleiades are a long ways away to the north, and I'm not sure this. They may have come here. Someone may have come here from the Pleiades, as far as I know. But according to Billy Myers, he thinks they came from the Pleiades, and he's got thousands of pictures that he took and conversed with various people. Well, there could be. I've heard that there are 58 alien races visiting Earth right now, maybe more, around 60. And they don't. Most of them don't talk or converse with normal humans, because we're violent and stupid, and we're too busy with our own, trying to earn a living with our own thoughts, and we're not open to that sort of thing. But there's people that are actually studying this and researching all over the globe and taking infrared and ultraviolet movies at night. We're using certain types of cameras and trying to figure things out, I think we're surrounded by not just aliens coming in here, but creatures that have evolved that can actually fly through the air at high speed. They're like sea creatures that have been around for many millions and a billion years or something. They came up out of the ocean. They discovered they could fly through the air at 400 miles an hour, and they have a very low mass, and they're made out of different material. And they photograph these things traveling around and hang around power lines, and Jose Escamilla has videos out on them and shows you how to take pictures of them. In certain areas of the globe, they're very prolific. There's many of them, and some of them are quite large, and others are only a foot long. And according to Jose Escamilla, you've seen where they smash into a wall and maybe leave a little splash of water or something like that, from destroying themselves.
Right.
And I've written about dimensional beings myself in another book that I interviewed this guy he was half Apache, Indian, and half Norwegian. Big guy, this guy's strong, his forearms are, the size of my legs, and I'm a pretty big guy myself. And he grew up in Arda, Florida, 60 miles north of Gainesville, Florida. And he was an 8-year-old kid, and he'd play around on the streets, and their mothers wouldn't let him out there when there was ball lightning out on the streets. They'd sneak out anyway, and they'd try to touch the ball lightning, and they never could touch it. And maybe they're living creatures, because right across the street from where he lived, there was a mean old guy, and he'd swear at the little kids and stuff. And if you gave him a flower, he'd swear at you, is what he told me. And ball lightning hit the railing of his porch, and he was leaning against it and ran along the railing and went up through his chest and killed him instantly. And he fell over the railing onto the street, and his house burned down immediately afterwards.
Oh.
So are they living creatures or what,
Right. Intelligent energy. Yeah, no doubt.
The plasma energy balls,
Yeah, that was very true.
He had a lot of encounters like that I put in the book, It's Home of the Angels. It was an interview I did with, his name was Kevin. And he moved to Hawaii, and he was an oil worker in Louisiana, went out on the rigs, and he woke up in his kitchen one day. They flew him in with a helicopter, and he fell asleep on his couch and near a kitchen there, and he was tired. He woke up, there were 3 aliens working on him. There was a tall gray and a medium-sized gray and a little guy, and he couldn't move. So he reached out, but he was able to get one of his hands. He's had powerful arms. I had him working for me for a while. He helped me put the roof on a cabin across Cook Inlet over there. We worked together. I flew him over there in my little plane. Anyway, he tried to reach out, and he grabbed one of those aliens that had a nylon-like tunic on there, a synthetic fabric. And it was stretchy, and he wanted to tear a piece of that off so he could prove that they were there. He just wanted to know that they were real. And he sensed that they were really afraid of him, and they were tugging as hard as they could to get away from him. They managed to get away, and they went outside, and he got up as fast as he could, and he went out, and they were gone already, and he didn't see them anymore.
Wow.
But he had a red mark on the back of his neck. He noticed in the mirror.
Mhm.
They'd poked him or did something to his neck. And his girlfriend lived on the other side of town in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he went to see her later, and she had the identical mark on the exact same spot on her neck.
Mm. That's interesting.
Yeah, so
No coincidence
uh,
there.
there's a lot of interesting things he talked about. And he moved to Hawaii, and he said, well, I called him up, and he called me, and he said he built a dojo over there. He's into
Nice.
martial arts. And the Hawaiians accepted him because he's a Native American. And so he lives near Molokai on a smaller island there. And he poured a 50-foot diameter cement slab for his dojo. And has been over there. This is quite a few years ago.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
And
nice. I lived on Maui for a while there. It's beautiful over on the Hawaiian Islands. Yeah, very powerful area, energetically
I've,
speaking.
I've been over there twice, and I went to Kauai and some of the islands.
Mhm.
But I'm going to drive out to Reno, Nevada, and also get some medical procedures done on my knees, I think.
Mhm.
There's a doctor there Dr. Red Feather, he injects blood platelets into your joints, and he's had about 80% success rate in regrowing some cartilage.
Mm.
So it might be worth a try if it's not too expensive.
Mhm. Exactly.
And they have a hot springs there. It's South Virginia City. And there's some really cheap apartments there that I can rent nearby, and we can stay in there for a month or so.
Yeah, it sounds like a nice little getaway.
Yeah, I need to get out of Alaska. I've been here too long.
Yeah, you need a break, huh? I know
A
last time
couple
we talked,
decades.
you were possibly going to move. I don't. You still going to stay in Alaska?
Oh, probably. I
Yeah.
like it here, and I like doing what I'm doing. And
Mhm.
I'll hopefully get a phone wire run over this house so we can talk on a real phone.
Actually, the audio is great. So yeah, you sound loud and clear.
It's not. The phone outlet's 100 feet away, and I put in for a phone 2 years ago.
Did you? Well, do you?
And they sent four guys over in a pickup, and they sat around and looked at the phone box, that little plastic green thing sticking out of the ground. It's on the other side of the street from me here, about 100 feet away. They sat there for half an hour drinking coffee, and they went away.
Oh, that's
And I still don't have a phone, so
wow. So you don't have to worry about the smart meters then, huh?
yeah, right. No
Well, that's
kidding.
the stuff.
We sold our apartment. It had a smart meter on it. My head was like 3 foot from that smart meter, and I wake up with headaches every night.
Yeah.
And eventually, I moved out of there and built this place.
Nice.
And we're out here in the trees and away from the power lines a ways, and no
Mhm.
smart meters, and we're using solar power. So
That's
we
great.
can leave anytime we want. We don't have to shut our electricity off. We just walk away.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
That's the way to live. Yep, you're doing it
We're
right.
we're on the Sterling Highway, about 10 miles south of Soldotna, Alaska, on a side road. Just right, we got highway frontage, and my wife makes jewelry, bead jewelry, a lot of it. I mean, she's just very prolific, and she works really hard. And she does really exquisite work, just unbelievable,
Nice.
complicated stuff.
That's awesome.
And she's a really hard-working lady. You could saw her video on my Facebook page.
Mhm. Yeah,
Got
she
over
is.
60,000 pounds of salmon.
Right. Did you say you were going to sell your boat last time we talked, or no? Did you ever sell it?
It's still for sale. I'm getting so darn old. I'm over 70. I'll be 72 here in a month or two.
Well, you don't
Couple months.
sound it. You're sharp as a whip.
And, I can't keep doing the things I'm doing forever here
Mhm.
unless I figure out a way to make myself younger and get rid of some of this arthritis.
Yeah, but you don't want to live to be 800 years old and working like I don't know what, do you?
Well,
That would be
yeah,
a
I got to
drag,
eat
wouldn't
more
it?
eggs. I eat
To
more
to
eggs.
live to live that long and be like working for the system and the illusion. That'd be terrible.
Well, there's other forms of work.
Right. Very true.
I do play the piano for large groups of people in the senior centers, and they want me. I play classical music and different things. It helps keep my brain active a little bit. Run a few thousand notes through there once in a while.
I think that's fantastic. Well, not to mention you have some exquisite books out. Plus, you're very knowledgeable. I mean, I just let you roll with information. You're very impressive with your data. I know it's a lot
Well,
for
I
people
don't
to
think
digest.
anybody, I don't think anybody's done what we've done to
I've
write
never
that
heard it.
cosmological ice ages, and
Yeah.
I've taken it to three different astronomers, and I lay the math out for them, and they start doodling, and eventually they start nodding their heads, and they agree that we're in orbit around the Sirius system.
Mhm.
But they're astronomers, and they're not physicists, they're not biologists, and they don't know about photosynthesis very much, so they don't know how coal is made or oil or limestone, so they can't seem to put it all together.
Mhm.
Our educational system is compartmentalized so much that they're experts in one field, and they can look out to these stars in awe and maybe figure out a few things of how they become that way, but they don't realize what their function is, what they actually do. When you're driving your car down the road, you're recycling stellar energy, and it didn't come from the sun because the air pressure on Earth is way too thick. It was hundreds of pounds per square inch, and you'd never see the sun. With 300 pounds per square inch during the Carboniferous era, it would be over 2,000 miles deep atmosphere.
Mhm.
So how are you going to see the sun?
Right.
People think the sun made everything. Well, it didn't. It couldn't possibly make the coal and 100-foot thick layers in Utah and Colorado and Pennsylvania. That's like 4,000 feet of plant growth to make anthracite coal with a 40-to-1 compression ratio. So to make 100 foot of it, we'd require 4,000 feet of trees and grass compressed down into anthracite coal.
Mhm.
And that's impossible. You can't even comprehend that sort of thing. It took a tremendous ice sheet 5 miles high or something to make that, and to have that much plant growth, it would require lots and lots of photons, and they didn't come from the sun. They couldn't possibly. Even over, say, a billion years, it couldn't have. Well, maybe the Carboniferous was an 80 million year warm period, 400 million years ago, 320 million years ago to 400 million years ago,
Mhm.
Carboniferous era, and that's what made a lot of that coal was during that era. And the thick layers of anthracite, down that we're mining to produce our steel to make cars and houses and skyscrapers and everything else. And, even the iron and stuff, that was all brought in. I'd recommend reading a couple of things. One is Velikovsky's book. It's the title of it is the three first letters in the Bible. In the beginning,
Mhm.
Immanuel Velikovsky. A lot of
Right.
he was a rogue scientist, and he was a real scientist. He could read ancient Sumerian. He was well versed in 7 languages. He could read ancient Greek
Mhm.
and translate it. And that little book he wrote, In the Beginning, is sort of a history on the Earth. And I discovered it after I wrote my book. I was doing searches on the moon to figure out when that arrived, and up popped this chapter, and it was translations from ancient Greek writings by Immanuel Velikovsky, chapter 3, and that really blew me away. So I downloaded the whole book, and I printed it off, and I got it on my computer, can email it to people, and
Mhm.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, we touched on that before, and also Worlds in Collision. That was another one of his books that was incredible.
on Earth
That
in
one.
Upheaval, and they were
Yeah.
all #1 bestsellers in the New York Times list, back in the 50s and 60s, I guess, and the scientists just really didn't like what he was putting out there because it was just too radical. And he
Well.
was basing all his research a lot on ancient calendars and ancient writings. He could read that stuff, and no one else could, you see, because he was
Mhm.
so well versed in the languages.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a unique book. There's no doubt. There was a continuation. I think that was from JP, but about that question about Alcyone and the Pleiades and Sirius, he was wondering what the orbit period was, if you know.
We're not, no, this Pleiades are so far away, we're not in orbit around the Pleiades at all, that I know of. And if it was, it would be billions of years. They're like, I don't even know how far the Pleiades are. That one time I did.
Hmm.
They're 800 light years or 1,000 light years away. You see, well, Sirius is only 8 light years from us, and we're heading toward it at 7.5 kilometers per second. And the other stars around us are very small, like the Centauri group. There's 3 there, and they're very small, so they don't affect us gravitationally, and they seem to be moving with us toward Procyon and Ceres. And they're probably in orbit around those giant stars also.
Hmm.
And then we have another star to the north that's heading toward us at 16 kilometers per second. The velocities vary whenever you look it up. There's some of them are faster, some slower, 14 kilometers per second, heading toward us. And that's Bernard's star, and it's about what is that thing? It's a red dwarf that could be a billion years older than our sun. Bernard's star, and it's 5.88 light years distance from us, and heading toward us from the north, and heading toward Sirius also. And it could arrive, about the time we get near Sirius, and whip around us. There's a lot of room between stars. They probably won't affect us gravitationally, but maybe it's in orbit around Sirius also, for all we know.
Hmm. Right.
And there's no way to tell, really. And it, being a billion years older than our sun, could have planets that would be inhabited, and they might be a billion years ahead of us in technology,
Yep.
which would be
Certainly.
kind of scary.
Oh, well, I don't discount that at all. Very advanced species. I mean, we're in a very vast multiverse in the illusion of. I would
You
suspect that
know,
we have quite a bit going on that we're not aware of. Most people aren't anyway.
our technology is only 200 years old, and we're so proud of our lasers and our striped toothpaste and stuff.
Right.
And,
And Henry, we're getting ready to wrap this up in about 10 minutes plus or minus, but let's give everybody a rundown as far as how to get your books and if they want to contact you, what's the best way to do
oh
that?
yeah, I have some free ebooks on my site. It's hankkroll.com or Guard Dog Books. I put them up there recently. My son did, and one is a recipe book written by 200 women, and it came from the Chicago Tribune or something like that. It's published in 1874. And the other is a cruising manual for you preppers out there that want to survive in the wilderness, and how to find gold, and how to make a sluice box, and rocker and prospect and land cruising manual. And it was owned by my wife's grandfather, who passed away a couple of years ago. And I inherited this little red cruising manual books, and it's out of copyright. It was written in 1910, so we put them up there as free ebooks for anyone to download. And if you download that other green recipe book, you just click on the covers and wait a few minutes. It'll download if you got a decent computer.
That's great.
And it's really an interesting book. It has a lot of tips and household tips in that green recipe book.
Hmm.
It's real cool. You ought to do it yourself there.
Right. No, I
Check it out.
strongly suggest people do check it out. Take some time to look this stuff over, start reading it. It's a lot to process and digest, but take a good look at it. This is stuff you'll not hear every day. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's why I like having you on, Henry. You have some very interesting information that I think has some. It just brings. There's definitely something to it. Let's put it that way. It's.
Well, yeah, the math works out when you do it and you look
Mhm.
at it. It's actual hard science, but they just don't want to look at it. You're educated folks,
Right.
because
Well,
they think I'm
mainstream
a
is mainstream
dumbass.
too, and the problem with mainstream is that they've only been taught so much. They've been spoon-fed information that's really not about a lot of information that's been cloaked for a very long
Well,
time.
you got to have somebody that's well versed in all of the sciences to
Mhm.
comprehend that
Right.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it took 2 of us to kind of figure it out. I couldn't quite do it on my own, but I came up with a lot of stuff after he clued me in on this other stellar orbit thing about around Sirius. So, it all made sense after that. And then, of course, I plotted her course because I navigate well. And I
Hmm.
have to. For my
Right.
living. That's how I earn a living, you know.
Exactly. That's what I mean. You're old school. That's what I like about you. People like you are the type that people should, if they ever meet you somewhere in a bar or someplace, they should just pick your brain for hours because you're like a walking database of information and experience.
Well, problem is with that, most people's brain shuts down after about 5 minutes,
I figure, yeah, but they'll,
and
they'll
they
get
can't
some piece of it.
comprehend what I.
Henry, they get little bits and pieces here and there. Even if they don't process everything, there's something they'll walk away with usually that they can resonate with.
Well, I hope so.
Me
That's
too.
what I
Yeah.
strive to do, and I talk to people randomly once in a while. I'm kind of a nutcase, goes around talking to people. I like doing these radio shows. I've done
I
quite
love
a
having
few
you
of
on.
them.
Yeah, I know Mark Snyder. He's the one that started having you on Ohio Exopolitics, and then of course I heard you on there. It was the first time I heard you, and I was like, I've got to get Henry on over here. So I'm really glad you've joined us over here too. That's been great for sure. So what about the Frog is Cooked now? This was an older book you put out, but was more political. Is that right?
Yes, it just was a compilation of stuff. People kept sending me all this stuff, so I kept poking into this file on my computer, and it turned into a book.
Hmm.
It's not that bad. I started out with a pretty good joke about the condition we're in, and then I put in the transcribed parts of the Iron Mountain Report, which is a computerized thing to manipulate society and manipulate the stock market and humans, and they use computers to do that.
Hmm.
And then it also has all of the crimes committed against humanity, from giving plutonium to pregnant mothers to doing experiments on U.S. soldiers and atomic experiments and all kinds of weird, horrible things that are in there that kept people sending me this stuff. And about the Native Americans being cheated out of their money for their oil royalties and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just a compilation of it. And it all came together, kind of a neat little book. Some people like it.
No, I think
And
it's good. I'm glad you have it out. Have you noticed more people moving out of Alaska or to Alaska?
well, I think they're moving here because it's kind of warm down in California at times. But their economy is failing up here because the state's running out of income and out of oil. They're going to have to do some drastic cutting and laying off of bureaucrat jobs. They've got hundreds of thousands of acres of state parks, and they're going to have to turn that over to people, which may lower land taxes because there'd be more land available. And we only grow 5% of the food that we consume. So if something happens economically down in the States or something, we're going to starve to death up here.
You think
I
so?
won't, of
What
course,
about
because
hunting
I
and
have
fishing?
access to wild game and
Hmm.
food, and can grow food. But we only grow 5% of what we consume.
Wow,
And the
it's
ships
amazing.
bring it in, sea land shipping and others in vans and acreage all the time and other places.
Hmm.
So, it could be real severe. I think the United States, if it goes bankrupt or has to do something, have a huge depression, like if you watch that Argentina video, you'll see how bad a shape that we're in because we're mimicking what they went through down there. They had a tremendous depression in the 80s.
Hmm.
And we're at 4,000% inflation. They couldn't pay their seniors' Social Securities or anything.
Right.
We may have to go through that here in America, and if that happens, Alaska will be really hurting because the existing population is too much. They don't grow enough food here.
Hmm. Well, you think people would be self-sufficient up there, like they'd learn how to hunt and fish
Well,
and be able to take care of themselves?
between the Environmental Protection Agency and other government regulations and everybody manipulating us, we can't build roads and we can't drill for oil and we can't mine gold or do anything because of all these regulations.
Hmm.
And we should have built a road to Nome and a railroad, and then you could get on that train and travel to Russia and go to France and Europe through the Trans-Siberian Railroad. But no, they don't want to do that, and they don't want to open up the country. Native Alaskans that live up there, they don't have natural gas or nothing, but they can't drill for it themselves because they don't have the money, and the regulations, environmental regulations, are too prohibitive to put a gas well down there.
Hmm.
And there's not enough market for a big company to come in there and do it because they don't want to do it. and the state doesn't want to do it. They're running out of money, so they're still using the honey bucket and burning wood for heat in these villages, you know.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And yeah, they got all these resources on their own land that they own, and they can't tap into it.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to talk the Bristol Bay Native Association into putting wells and selling gas wells and selling it to China, but it fell through sort of there. But they have a tremendous area of natural gas there. You know, they could have put a dock in there and had LNG ships bring it over to China. They're sort of non-polluting material, you know. Oh yeah, China's building one new coal plant every month, and Obama wants to shut all of ours down. You know, that's
Well, let's just look at everything that's made in China now, anyways, right? So it's
yeah.
like we're living in China in the illusion of it's disgusting. So hang on, don't get me started with that. But we are ready to wrap this up just about. Henry, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you on board with us. I want to thank you very, very much. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be carrying this cell phone with me, so you can call me up on the road anytime.
Cool. Oh yeah, I'll definitely have you back. Keep us posted as far as what's going on with you over there too. And I do want to thank everybody for
hanging out.
Yeah, and I do want to thank everybody for tuning in
Reno
this
area there someplace.
Yeah, I do want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and also stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky coming up next to sail you on into the night from down under, as they always do, with their wonderful show. And is there anything else you want to leave us with, Henry? I think we have about a minute, maybe a little bit more. Did he hang up?
Thank you very much for having me on, and check out those free ebooks. Those are amazing. They're antiques, by the way, 1800s and 1910, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really nice. Have you ever thought about writing a biography for you?
Not really.
No?
You know, I put two books together, one on my mother and one on my father from existing
we covered
writers.
that. Yeah, and Henry, we're out of time here, but thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you again, Henry. Everybody have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.